Hello everyone, I'm Marie Vigouroux.
And I'm Jeremy Greer.
And this is Rude Eats, a Hannibal podcast where we take you through every episode of NBC show Hannibal. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Mary. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. It's nice to see the roles reversed a little bit here.
This is so exciting. I'm so excited. For those of you that don't know, Mary and I met via our mutual Supernatural podcast. And on Mary's podcast, she is the knowledgeable person. She's watched every single episode, and her partner Drew hasn't seen anything. And we are completely reversing that. I'm going to be the Hannibal expert, and Mary is the complete newbie. And I'm so excited to get all your opinions about Hannibal. You have no idea.
And listen, the thing is, the complete newbie, I think like this is an understatement because, so how about you start by telling us a little bit like what your experience is with the Hannibal universe, because I understand that it's not just this show.
No,
obviously, there's movies, but you mentioned books.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know about that.
So everything started with Thomas Harris. He wrote a series of books featuring the character Hannibal, who is a serial killer that eats people. I don't think that's a spoiler to say. I think pretty much everybody knows that. It was famously adapted into a movie called Silence of the Lambs, starring Anthony Hopkins as the titular, as Hannibal Lecter. That's one of the highest regarded movies ever made. And I think the books were already very, very popular. The movie brought it up to a level of just everybody knew Hannibal's name all of a sudden. My mom read these books as I was a kid, and because I was a precocious little child, I also read the books way too early. And it's interesting because the adaptations are so different from one another. In the 80s, Michael Mann made an adaptation of Manhunter, which is one of the books that the series is known for. It's very Michael Mann 80s style. So it's got a lot of neon lighting and surging electronica music and sunsets and sex scenes and all this other stuff. And it's really interesting, but it's not horrific as Silence of the Lambs is, which is a very terrifying movie. And then Silence of the Lambs had multiple sequels. They continually went downhill over time. None of them are. All of them are worth watching if you're a Hannibal fan because it does some crazy stuff. But it's not worth watching if you're just a casual movie fan. And then this happened. So Hannibal came out in 2013. And almost instantly when it was announced, I think everybody was like, what is this? Because it had such a unique style to it. And it was also doing something really clever. It was kind of just taking these characters and making its own universe about it. So that it's not slavishly devoting itself to the source material, which opened itself up to tell a lot of interesting stories and do a lot of interesting things it wouldn't normally do.
I really love it when creators actually use the characters, but then really use the world as a sandbox and start playing within that. That's something that happens a lot within fandom. And so in and of itself, it sort of feels like Hannibal is like a love story or like a love song for fandom, right? The way that you're describing that they took the characters, but then they created their own world. It feels like an AU almost, you know?
Hannibal is the fix-it fic for Silence of the Lambs. We could just go ahead and say that.
Okay. All right. Oh boy. I don't know what that means.
It's interesting because Brian Fuller, the creator and writer for the show, kind of started this out as this is a love story between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter, and you see that in Hannibal in the first episode when as you listen to our first episode, which will be out in a couple of weeks after you listen to this, you'll hear us talk about that almost instantaneously, that connection. But that connection doesn't necessarily exist in Silence of the Lambs. It's really interesting. I think there's an interpretation from the book that you could make from that, but it's also very not explicit. So for Brian to be hey, we're going to do this is fascinating to me, especially in 2013 where we were in America, at least, they were still fighting. LGBT people were still fighting for their ability to get married. So it's kind of a fascinating idea just for the show. Have you not seen any of the movies or read any of the book? You have what do you know about Hannibal before you watch this first episode?
Okay, listen. All I know about Hannibal is Hannibal Lecter, Clarice. That's it. Okay. That's all I know. He eats people. He's a serial killer. That's pretty much it. Okay. But for this particular adaptation of it, I didn't even know there were books, right? So that tells you how little I knew about it. For this particular adaptation of it, though, I do know about the love story between Hannibal and Will, because I know a little bit about Brian Fuller and what he was trying to do with this with these characters. But that's all. That's it. That's all I know.
Okay. Well, this is going to be
that's it.
fascinating because my wife and I, even my sister, are like really, really into the lore of these worlds have created that these have created. So like the characters that show up and the characters that specifically don't show up are interesting definitely because of licensing issues. So you mentioned Clarice. Yes. Clarice in Silence of the Lambs is a young FBI agent who is assigned to work with Hannibal Lecter to get his help to assist with another serial killer case while Hannibal Lecter is in prison. Because of weird movie rights, Clarice didn't ever show up in the show, so she just does not appear, and that's like a huge hole in the lore. But the way they work around that stuff is really interesting. I think it actually is better for it because people weren't able to make the comparison between the two. So let's talk briefly about the podcast, and then we'll let people get back to their lives. We have decided that Rude Eats is going to be a bi-weekly podcast, which means 2 episodes per week, right? That's how we do that.
Yes, exactly. So 2 episodes per week, and then on weeks where we're really, really busy, then we will have 3 episodes per week. That's exactly how it's going to
bi-weekly is such an awful term. I hate it so much.
I hate it too.
We'll be releasing every other week, so you can tune in to us via your Apple Podcast, on Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts. We'll have links in the show notes for this episode, so you can go to visit our website. If you want to help support us, I think the best thing to do is just leave reviews and tell your friends. Just DM everybody in your contacts list. Like do a text spam to all of your cousins. Get them in here. We want them in.
Especially those who have watched Hannibal, but maybe those who haven't, so that they can discover it along with me. That would be really cool.
Yeah, we're going to be careful to be spoiler free. So I'll not only do I want to kind of save you from the surprises in the show, because I think some of the surprises are really shocking and great if you experience them naturally. But also just as people listen, I like to have people to listen along that maybe not heard it for the first time or not seen it for the first time. So
incredibly careful to avoid spoilers, especially when working on this first episode that we are going to come out with in a couple of weeks.
Yes, I'll help you. So if you want me to look up stuff for you, and like, what does this mean? I'll research it and then hit you back up with the details so you don't get spoiled. Because Tumblr is a minefield.
Thank you so much.
The fandom is still crazy. So,
but there you go. That's why anything that's like, if I look something up and I see Tumblr, I'm like, skip. Nope, don't want to see anything. Don't want to accidentally get spoiled. Before we end this little introduction and trailer, I think it would still be really cool for people to know like how this podcast came to be, because the idea hit us like so long ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, years in the making at this point that we've been talking about this.
Exactly.
Listeners, I joked. So here's the situation. I am currently hosting a X-Files podcast, and Mary and I DM a lot about how great Gillian Anderson is. So that's just a conversation that happens. I was driving in my car one day, and I'm listening to a rap album, and a rapper made a comment about Scully and Hannibal. In the same line, referencing that Gillian Anderson's appearance in the TV show Hannibal, but calling her Scully because whatever. So I mentioned to Mary, I was like, hey, have you seen this show? Like, do you have any comment? Like, she's in it, and it'd be great. I think you would really like it. And Mary, you were like, yeah, it's on my list. I want to watch it one day. And I was like, oh, sure, yeah, one day we could podcast about it. Listeners, that was like less than 48 hours ago. That was almost instantaneous. I think like a couple of hours later, you were watching the first episode and making notes. We had already picked out names. Autumn, my wife, was extremely excited. Like, this all happened extremely fast. I'm so excited about it.
There were lyrics to a song, like everything was being set into place immediately after this. Yeah. Everyone was on board.
Once we make a decision, we roll. So, so definitely join us on our every other week episodes of Rude Eats, and tell us how you feel about Hannibal.
Yeah, and Will Graham.
Yeah, but mostly Hannibal. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
I want Will Graham, I really do. And I think that we could have some fun. Then you can do anything you like. I might even go and help you catch the Shrike. I want Will Graham, I want that man. For every meal and on demand. His mind shines and his body's cut. I know that he works for the FBI, but what other man has pure empathy and the ability to see my mind? Jack, what other thing have I ever asked you for besides never looking into my pantry, and I won't get that either. Damn. I want Will Graham, I want him so, and he really doesn't need to know what's in my meals or on my mind. I just want Will Graham to be mine. I want him and I want him now. I said before, I don't care how. I'll give him tests, he'll draw a clock, and then his dark desires I will unlock. We'll be together, Will and me. We'll throw some grand dinner parties. We'll cut the flesh, we'll cook the meat. He'll eat the brew just like me. Gimme goddamn Will Graham.